Let me think back. The first drawing I ever had published in a national magazine, well, one was in Esquire in '61, but I was in college publishing, so say from 1954 on. So what does that make it? Almost 60 years.
You picked out all these works then?
Yes, I went to Vermont and spent 2.5 days looking at lots and lots of Ed Koren drawings, loving every moment of it. I have known his work for a long time, and he did not interfere. He let me have anything that I wanted, so I felt very good about that.
Yeah, it seems like this moment in time, a lot of your career is sort of coming together in your world because of the combination of this show with the huge retrospective at Columbia, right?
Exactly.
So I really want to hear what that feels like for you.
Well, these are all children because one lavishes a huge amount of attention on each one.
Exactly.
Bringing it into the world, raising it.
But I just want to get a feeling like, you know, is it like old photo albums? Is it like your whole family coming together? It must be.
When I look at these themes that the curators have chosen, and the way in which they chose to flesh it out with drawings, then it really kind of makes me say, wow, I mean, I guess I've done something, you know, because it cares.
You have obviously gotten a lot of honors. I mean, you have a Guggenheim fellowship.
And
the
American Academy in Berlin.
Yes,
one of those.
I mean,
and believe it or not,
people think you're pretty good at this.
The Governor's Art Award for the state of Vermont. That was actually
that must have been
wonderful. That was really wonderful. And I tell you, since you asked that question, one of the great moments of my life, you know, all my friends came to this ceremony in the State House up in Vermont, which is this wonderful little golden dome gem. It's built in the 1850s. And the well of the legislature is pretty big. And I walked in, not expecting much, and it was filled with all these people I know, and they stood up and gave me a standing ovation.
Wow.
That was the first time I ever really felt anything like what you're suggesting.
Wow.
The only time.
And that's like recently.
That was a couple of years ago. 2007, actually.
Wow.
One working methods they haven't changed much. It's still the little pen and the ink bottle and the long, you know, kind of. I mean, it's like things like this. It's just a fountain pen, basically.
You use that?
No, I do it on the road. I use it, but no, it's a little dip pen and paper and ink scrawled on paper and the feel of the paper and the feel of the pen and it's a craft,
right,
which I love. I mean that part of it. So people can say, why don't you use a tablet? Why don't you use a scanner? Why don't you use all these things? And I draw with the computer, and I've tried it. It's just it's soulless. There's nothing there.
So tell me a little bit about like the characters and the personality within your work, like the thinking in your work that's changed since you've started.
Well, I think if I think it's the sharpening of my notions of what's funny and what isn't, and what's a good subject and what isn't necessarily a good subject. Whether I've done it before, whether they can be variations on that same subject, and you know, whether I really, when I discover something new, I'm really quite pleased. And but it's all you know, nuance and change. It's never static.
Where did the style of, what do you call them, hairy people, or what do you call them?
I don't call them anything. I really don't. They're a simulacrum of ourselves in some one form or another, and they don't have a real name, and they don't have, in my view, I mean, they're just my people. They're like a surrogate of me and us in all sorts of ways, either the animals or the human. I mean, I go back and forth, because sometimes an animal is funnier to hold the mirror up to nature, and sometimes it's, you know, using you couldn't do that with an animal. It wouldn't make any sense, or that. But the relationship of animals to people, that other drawing way down there, is a nice mixture of my two approaches to things. But each of them have a character. Each of them. I mean, they're not stock characters like South Park or
obviously.
You know.
Well, I think one of the things that I think is so gifted about your work is your ability to capture like the essence of, you know, what the soul of what people are like, or the soul of what animals are like, the essence. How did you find the style of doing these kinds of people. Like,
I
mean, it seems like you've been doing it a long time. And where did that come from?
Well, I think they found me. I mean,
you can't really articulate it.
This is what I wanted. This is how I started. This is how it evolved.
And you don't know where.
I don't know where it came from.
Interesting.
I don't know how it evolved. And each time I draw, it's a little different. And there's a kind of, if you look at early stuff and then more recent things, it's evolved, and just eyes, the way that I've drawn those, the pen work, the depth or lack of it in a drawing, in terms of color depth and color intensity, the palette, if you will, the space and the detailing or the lack of detailing. I mean, each one is somewhat different from the last, and each one is specific to whatever it is I'm drawing. So I make these decisions. But sometimes the decisions are overshadowed by a kind of
just innate whatever. There's the way you draw naturally. What's it like dealing with a New Yorker at this point? Is it kind of like you just send them whatever you like, and do they ever reject things? Do you worry about them?
Do they ever reject things?
Really?
Yeah.
They reject stuff from you?
Everybody.
Do you feel the pressure of the professional pressure still? Of are they going to like this?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I get very depressed when they don't, especially if there's something I really like. Because I send things like those drawings, the little drawings. Those are the rough.
What year is this from?
This was, let's see, it's not too far old. It was about 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And why don't we look at this, because this is what Edward sends in, and then they approve it.
It's a pencil drawing.
And then when they approve it, then he just does this. And then they're totally fine.
And they publish, and it's parts of it. So I may think of this caption first, which is, tell them how hard we've worked to protect their habitat, is what it says.
Right.
What it says, and there are these hikers just, stranded up in a tree.
So funny.
And so she's this relationship between these two is a kind of it's hard to describe it because I don't want to. I think whoever sees it has to kind of start figuring out the relationship and this, of size and floridness.
Feels very male-female.
Could be.
Could be. He's coy too.
Well, I am coy because I don't know. This was for the New York Times book review, and it had to do with innovation and conceptualization of ideas and how they come from. And when it comes to it, boom, sometimes like that. I mean, this has a particular resonance right now, but it was done, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. I think there were some bats in the subway somewhere along the line. So it was of the great gas glut. Remember when gas was $4 a gallon? And nobody was using their car.
Do you like bicycling? You're a big bicycle fan.
What intrigues me about is how people ride, what they look like, what kind of bikes they ride, what ages of people, the diversity, how it's used.
I want you to know that you should feel really safe here because Edward is also the captain of the fire department in his town.
It's the dirty secret of being a firefighter is it's really exciting. And
really? You like that excitement?
Well,
is there a lot of drinking also?
No.
How about barbecues?
Not too many of that. We're not.
So, if there was a fire in here, which drawing would you take?
You know what? I'd probably not take one because if you take one, you're singling it out, and you're just going to say goodbye, everybody.
Too bad.
Well, the one thing about firefighting and going out on a call is it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, which is something the drawing also has, but not as defined. You never know when you're finished.
Is that how you feel?
You don't know how you're going to begin it. And during the course of it, you're not sure where you're going. You're like, and with the firefighting, you're there, you do what you have to do, and you leave, and it's done.
And
you
it's
feel,
good.
And it's very satisfying.
You did something good. Have you ever saved anyone's life?
I've not saved their life per se, but maybe in a sense by cutting them out of cars.
Wow.
Helping ambulance.
Wow, I would never have guessed.
Why not?
Because you're, a little skinny guy.
Well, that's in fact a